are there proposals or ideas for affordable housing?
So maybe I'll speak, and Javier, if you want to add on. The stationary includes 4 acres of publicly owned land. Those sites are now, in the mayor's opinion, underutilized by the Fire Bureau. PDC has undertaken a study of what activities go on there and where they could be more appropriately accommodated. So that public ownership of land gives us the opportunity to dictate how it is developed. And I think the mayor has an expectation that there will be affordable housing as part of that mix. And Javier has noted that PHB is counting on it as well.
I just have a couple of questions. I'm confused by the term industrial office. So office I get, industrial I get, but industrial office, what is industrial office?
Well, maybe I can jump in here. Industrial office is what we call employment uses in the Central East Side that are typically creative industries, they're technology industries. There's a whole list. In the Central East Side, we created the employment overlay as an experiment with the Central East Side Industrial Council to see if we kept it in employment use but liberalized the range of types of employers that could be in there, can we increase the density of jobs in the buildings that are in the Central East Side? Because that's the objective there, is to get the most employment that we can out of the Central East Side. And so we created the employment overlay zone. And what we call those uses that aren't your classic industrial but are still not retail, this kind of employment use we call industrial office. But that's what it entails. It's if you are an office where the service is primarily to a retail kind of function, lawyers, medical offices, that's not what we're talking about. But if you're a film studio or a company, intellectual property, if you're making something but it isn't necessarily physical and you're primarily an employment use where the people coming and going are related to the production of that business, that industry, that's what we call industrial office. And so when you see the Central East Side, the Southeast Quadrant plan, you're going to see a proposal to actually expand the area in the Central East Side where we can get that kind of use, because the Central East Side, even before industrial office, had the highest job densities of any industrial district in the city. Okay. Over the recession, the Central East Side actually experienced job growth. So we're counting on that to be able to meet Goal 9, honestly, Commissioner.
Okay. So we're talking about things like the East Bank Commerce Center?
East Bank Commerce Center, the old B&O warehouse, that sort of thing, and the businesses that go in there and spreading. Originally we just targeted the older multi-story non-reinforced masonry buildings, but now we're actually seeing developers come in and build speculative buildings for this kind, multi-story spec buildings for this kind of use. And that's a little bit, could be a big success for us in the Central East Side in terms of increasing employment.
Okay, Mike,
yeah, that was actually Joe's last point, was one of the main foci of the conversation we had with our joint PDC commission meeting with regard to how we think differently about industrial jobs and the ability to intensify in that area is part of that thinking.
So, and leading to the issue of the job growth and who gets those jobs. And so part of the equity question for me is looking at if what Joe describes, I think is a good idea to expand that and to look at jobs in a much different way. When you look at that classification, who gets those jobs and whether or not it's a diverse group, or I happen to work in the Central East Side, and it's not a diverse group per se that I've seen so far. So I think PDC has an equity conversation about how do we get those jobs in a more diverse. We certainly want the companies, but we want the diversity of those jobs also. So from that, just kind of leave it at that, and we'll work on that when we get back at the end. Other questions for testimony?
I'll just add, it's nice to see you back in City Hall, Jillian.
With that, we'll bring you back up after testimony. Go
Just
ahead.
to clarify, in terms of the number of units at the North Mac, when I was speaking, I didn't have the right number. So we are proposing 434 units. The original plan had 479, and there's a different breakdown on 0 to 30, but in terms of number of units, they're almost the same.
Okay. All right, and we're going to come back to housing when we come back. We're going to talk more. So again, I will call up 3 individuals at a time for testimony. It's 3 minutes, and you just need to state your name. And if you wish to testify, please fill out a testimonial card. Give it to Julie. So we have Barbara Ross, Tasha Harmon, and Ruth Adkins. Barbara, you want to get started?
Hi, my name is Barbara Ross, and I'm here testifying as an individual and not on behalf of any organization. Many of the recommendations and the amendments to the urban renewal plans are positive and reflect careful and detailed thought by the staff of the PDC and the advisory committee. However, I am most troubled by the possibility that the affording housing goals will be reduced, or they will be implemented in such a weak way that we won't actually see the construction of those units. The Portland Comprehensive Plan policy stipulates that housing units in new development areas must mirror the income profile of residents of the whole city. This hasn't happened to date, and if you follow the recommendations before you, they probably won't happen in the future. We are told that out of 4,000 units that have been built to date, only 209 are affordable to families with less than 60% of the median family income. As you study the charts and graphs and the statistics on these pages that you get, these voluminous reports you get, it's easy to forget that these are real people who have no place to live that fits with their income. I'd like to share a brief story with you of one formerly homeless person who is a mother of 2 children. She's somebody I know personally. She managed to get a job in the food service industry, but her hours are irregular and it's a long commute, and she has to change buses to get there. She gets food stamp and welfare helps her pay for child care. She pays $750 a month for rent. Last month, she missed some days because of illness, and her take-home pay was only $601. She figures that she can cover her rent on January 1st if she gets more hours and saves all her paychecks and uses tips for laundry and non-food essentials. She does not know how she will pay for her power bill. Last year, her electricity and her heat were cut off, and she was without heat for her family for several days. She has to keep her phone working so that she can keep contact with her supervisor so she will know when her assigned hours are for her shifts at work. I believe that this woman will make it because of her grit and determination, but it would only take one misstep for her to land back on the streets trying to get herself and her children into some kind of shelter. We have to remember that these are real people. They're not just numbers on a page on a chart, and that the development of housing in the urban renewal districts are subsidized by dollars that would otherwise go to taxing districts. The city must not ignore the requirement that the construction of housing units should meet the needs of all income groups. And we see many groups coming forward and saying that they are object to seeing homeless people on the streets of our city and see that those people are somehow disturbing the pleasant atmosphere of our city. I love Portland. I love being here. I love public transportation.
Thank you.
But we have to realize that those people are also individuals. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Tasha Harmon. As a founding member of the Coalition for a Livable Future and the former executive director of the Community Development Network, I was involved in negotiating the North Macadam agreements as well as the River District agreement. I sent you long and detailed testimony, and what I want to do right now is to comment a little off the cuff. I am deeply concerned about the affordable housing issues that several of you have been raising questions about in North Macadam and in the Central East Side, frankly, and in the River District. But here we're going to talk about North Macadam today. I'm asking you to slow this process down. I'm asking you not to accept or to recommend acceptance of these amendments until we have actual commitments about how the affordable housing goals are going to get met. We're now seeing the city backpedaling from its earlier statement that it was going to formally reduce the affordable housing goals that it set, which were already modest in the first 2 phases of North Macadam, and they failed to meet those goals. And they failed to meet them in part, as someone alluded to, because they didn't enforce their the requirements in their private development agreements. We're seeing this pattern over and over again. We're also seeing that the city is missing its urban renewal affordable housing goals, even in the River District, in its flagship affordable housing commitment zone. This is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan because North Macadam is spending 30 to 35% of TIF dollars on affordable housing. That's not a sufficient standard. It's not meeting the goals. The goals are for the income profile of North Macadam to match the income profile of the city as a whole. And it is failing, and it is going to fail. And it's going to fail because the city has limited itself to creating affordable housing by throwing public money at it. It's insufficient. We told them and this council that it was insufficient before. Incentive zoning is a lovely idea, but it's not going to get you there either. You need inclusionary zoning requirements in exchange for the dramatic public subsidies in these districts that are increasing private landowners' values astronomically. You need linkage fees to capture some of this lovely employment stuff that's coming in and move some of that added value to meet the income profile requirements that you set. Without those requirements, North Macadam will not meet the goal of matching the income profile of the city as a whole. It will become another area where the haves see lots of profits and lots of gain from public investment, and the have-nots don't see it. This is not the time to just do business as usual. Portland is not going to meet its carbon footprint reduction goals. It's not going to reduce the achievement gap in schools goals. It's not going to meet the 20-minute walkable neighborhoods goals. It's not going to meet any of that unless affordable housing is thought of as infrastructure in the city, in every neighborhood in the city. I know this commission cares deeply about those things, and this is a moment to put your foot down and say we can't do it until we have a clear plan. Which parcels is the city going to dedicate to affordable housing?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ruth Adkins. I'm here representing the Oregon Opportunity Network, also known as Oregon ON. So we're a statewide association of affordable housing and community development nonprofits, including 19 member organizations here in Portland. 3 of our members, Rose CDC, Reach Community Development, and Innovative Housing, have folks in the audience here today, and I believe both Rose and Reach will also be testifying. So we're here today to follow up on our recent letter regarding housing affordability in the North Macadam urban renewal area. Oregon ON and our member organizations strongly support and urge you to stay true to the city's goals for housing affordability in this high opportunity area. However, the city must move immediately before it is too late to secure sites in order to ensure that affordable housing will take place in the area, and must work aggressively to pursue those goals along the lines of what Ms. Harmon was just saying. It is vital that the city's actions in the North Mac URA be consistent with the current comprehensive plan housing policy, which states strive for livable mixed income neighborhoods throughout Portland that collectively reflect the diversity of housing types, tenures, rental and ownership, and income levels of the region. As community partners, Oregon ON and our members stand ready and are willing and eager to help develop creative solutions that ensure we can provide housing opportunity to low and moderate income residents in this and other urban renewal areas. Thanks very much for considering our comments as you move forward with decisions that are going to shape this area for decades to come. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Questions? I have one question for you. Is it a goal? Like if we said 30% of the housing has to be there, is that? I mean, that's one part of it. Funding's the other part, but
it's not just about funding.
But it is about the goal of having a certain amount of affordable units in understanding you, correct? Not,
Yes,
not about
and-
whether or not the units are 400 or 500, but it's 30% of the total production kind of goal.
That is the goal that we thought the city was agreeing to in its documents. So yes, and more importantly, it's about having some teeth and having some tools that will actually produce that goal. Because what I hear every time I hear stuff from the city now is, well, the problem is we don't have enough resources. And that's not a good excuse. There are lots of resources. You're just deciding where to use them.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Next, we have Nick Solvey, Sarah Stevenson, and Danielle Valerie.
I guess I'll start. I'm Nick Sovey. I'm the Director of Rose Community Development, and I'm also the Portland Policy Council Chair. As you know, Portland is currently experiencing a crisis in housing affordability and access. While there is a boom in multifamily construction at the high end of the market, affordable vacancy rates are at historic lows. There is widespread displacement of low-income residents and people of color, and too many families are experiencing or are at risk of homelessness. We must not become another San Francisco where only the wealthy can afford to live in high-opportunity areas such as North Macadam. We ask the city to maintain its existing goals and make it a priority to identify land, additional resources, and creative solutions to achieve the goals. We know it is no easy task to create affordable housing at all income levels. Continued disinvestment at the federal level is a huge issue. We also need tools like inclusionary and incentive zoning, and we are working with allies to lift the statewide ban on inclusionary zoning. It is still possible to meet the existing modest goals, and there is still time to pursue resource development strategies and solutions to bridge the relatively small gap between the existing goals and the Housing Bureau's initial estimate of available resources. These solutions can and should include all income levels and housing across the continuum, including home ownership as well as rental housing. We believe that working together, our community can meet this challenge and provide a vibrant and equitable mix of housing types in North Macadam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Commission. My name is Dan Valliere. I'm the CEO at Reach Community Development, also a member of Oregon Opportunity Network. I will just echo a lot of the testimony that you've already heard, so I won't say it all over again, but just to say, essentially support what you've heard from Ms. Harmon, from Mr. Sovey, from Ms. Adkins. Reach is the developer of Gray's Landing, which is the sole affordable housing in South Waterfront at this point. Great public investment was invested to make it happen, clearly. That's needed. That's a key part of the puzzle. It's 209 apartments, so it was a great step forward. But since the original vision for the neighborhood in 1999, that's what's been done. So clearly needs to be ramped up. We need a pace and a level of aggressiveness on everyone's part involved, city, landowners, developers, to make it happen. I thought maybe what would be useful is I would just read to you a very short snippet from the North Macadam Framework Plan, which was adopted by the City Council in August of 1999, which laid out the vision for the neighborhood. The mix of incomes, household type, this is spoken as if we were in 2020, the way it's written. So we're in 2020. In 2020, the mix of incomes, household types, age, and race of residents generally reflect the diversity found in the city as a whole and are balanced with local employment opportunities. The specific housing needs of a full spectrum of residents were considered through the development of the district and are well served. The challenge of creating a public-private collaboration to finance and build an array of housing that is sufficiently affordable has been met with dramatic success. Obviously, vision statements are just that, they're visions. But I think you can see in here the solutions to what we're facing. We need a public-private collaboration, and we need a commitment to make it happen. It's not out of our grasp. 2020 is not here yet. So I think your role is to emphasize in no uncertain terms the importance of meeting these goals. We should not back off on them, and the investments need to be made. And affordable housing set aside is a floor, not a cap, not a cap. So we can remember that too as we debate how to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Got a
Question?
Just a quick comment. I was there in '99 before when we were working on that, and the same is true with the natural resources in the Greenway. In my opinion, we've fallen short of where we would hope we would be today. I just want a clarification. The city does have on its agenda to go to the legislature to deal with the inclusionary zoning issue. Correct?
Yes, that is.
I know it's in the comp plan, and is that true?
I don't know.
I mean, I just saw.
I think it is.
Yeah,
but
there was,
it is, yes.
But the relevant question here is, I mean, because we're putting in public resources through urban renewal, we can essentially create that opportunity through development agreements. We don't need the state authority to do it. Is that right, Joe?
Well, and with all these things, and I think as the panel comes back up, it's getting enough return out of the district to fund any of it, the economic development side and the housing side. And so our panelists from the bureaus can talk to that more specifically. But yeah, there's a variety of ways to bring resources to bring to housing production in the district. And even on your project, right, it was a bundle of resources. It wasn't just TIF, because that's my understanding of what it typically takes to do any of those housing projects. So, it's always a bunch of resources from a variety of sources that are needed to do anything significant as that building. Okay. But, and then in addition, we are undertaking the study with housing to look at, in lieu of mandatory inclusionary housing, the bonuses for the central city.
Or in addition to.
In addition to, right.
Thank you. Sarah Stevenson? She had to leave? Okay. Peggy Bingray, Deborah Anoa, and Michael Harrison. So Peggy and Deborah, you wanted to be together? Is that?
Please.
Yes.
Buddies.
So why don't the two of you, one of you get started, and then
I'm Peggy Bengry, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Portland. The League has been involved in the city's use of urban renewal since the 1990s. In 2005, we served on a Portland Development Commission-led Central East Side Advisory Committee, considering the expiring district's future. More recently, the League participated as a member of the Urban Renewal Area Amendment Advisory Committee, examining the mayor's proposed modifications to Portland's urban renewal areas. I want to talk about Central East Side here. The proposed Central East Side Urban Renewal Area Amendment would add 16 acres to the district to fund streets and sidewalks around the new light rail station in the Clinton Triangle and provide development assistance. Diverting funds from the county, schools, and other taxing jurisdictions for this purpose is an inappropriate use of urban renewal. Since the city owns a significant portion of the area, making it suitable for private development should be a manageable undertaking without using money that otherwise would be spent in classrooms or providing mental health services. The proposal further envisions using resources to subsidize additional private development on sites within the current boundaries. This district has been in existence since 1986. In 2006, it was extended for 12 years. According to the proposed plan amendment, taxing jurisdictions will not see full recovery of their foregone revenue until halfway through the century, in 2051 and 52. If the district were allowed to end in 2018 per the last amendment, the break-even point would occur in 2032 and 33. In light of the significant unmet needs in our community, it is difficult to justify extending the life of a district created in the 1980s for the purpose of installing transportation infrastructure and subsidizing private development. We urge the Planning and Sustainability Commission to examine whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the city's equity goals. It is the League's position that the district should be allowed to end in 2018 as currently planned, and the city should use its own resources to complete the projects outlined in the proposed amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Debbie Iona, also representing the League. Our primary, and I'm going to talk about North Macadam, our primary concern in North Macadam relates to affordable housing. The comp plan housing policy calls for housing production in new redevelopment areas to match the citywide income profile. During the early planning, concerns arose that there would be insufficient funds to meet all the district goals, including housing. Compromise affordable housing goals were established with a commitment to match the city's income profile for all units produced in excess of 3,000. To date, over 4,000 units have been built. Of those, 209 are affordable, including 42 units at 30%. Had the city carried out its policy of meeting the income profile, there would be about 1,500 affordable units with over 500 at 30% median family income. The 0 to 30% goals are especially critical since recent data show a shortfall in excess of 20,000 units. Portlanders of all incomes, including very low-income households, should be able to live in the new South Waterfront neighborhood and benefit from its publicly subsidized amenities. Planners involved in creating the district were aware that it would take more than urban renewal dollars to accomplish the housing goals. The district housing development strategy lays out the tools at the city's disposal, including early acquisition of land, fair share assignment of affordable units to major landowners, and establishment of targets through development agreements. Unfortunately, land within the plan area was not secured before real estate prices began to skyrocket. The Central District Development Agreement included a commitment from North Macadam investors for 274 units at 60% MFI. The city assumed responsibility for those units in 2006 when it executed the TRAM funding package. In 2009, it abandoned an agreement with OHSU that would have resulted in 400 affordable units in the airspace over a parking garage just west of Elizabeth Carruthers Park. We urge you to delay signing off on adoption of this amendment until we have a clear picture of how the city will meet the housing goals. With the 5-year extension, more time and resources will be available. It will take more than money to implement the housing strategy, however. Entities benefiting from the substantial public investment in North Macadam must be required to incorporate affordable housing into their developments or help pay for them on other sites. Furthermore, policies such as inclusionary zoning should be considered. Finally, as you continue the work of updating the comp plan, we encourage you to keep in mind the power of the current housing policy that calls for housing production in new redevelopment areas to match the citywide income profile. We need policies that are equally concrete to guide us over the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Harrison, and I'm speaking on behalf of Oregon Health and Science University today. The proposal before you would generate funds the city can use to facilitate job growth in South Waterfront, specifically by extending Bond Avenue through our Snitcher campus. OHSU's mission is to improve the health and well-being of Oregonians, and although that's not precisely an economic development mission, by doing our job well, we create a significant number of jobs in the city. Future job growth as well depends on infrastructure. For example, when fully staffed, the Night Cancer Challenge will allow us to hire over 380 new direct employees in South Waterfront and will result in almost 500 additional non-OHSU job and locations throughout our community. In addition to these jobs, city support for South Waterfront also facilitates the growth of our clinical services, which will mean approximately 850 additional OHSU employees in South Waterfront by 2020. While we're still determining exact staff mixes, OHSU has a proven track record of producing quality jobs that will be even more accessible to Portland's east side once the Tillicum Crossing opens and rapid transit extends east out the Division and Powell corridor. A quarter of our existing 14,000 jobs have a low barrier to entry, requiring an associate's degree or less, meaning OHSU job growth is positioned to help Portlanders from all backgrounds achieve stable careers. Jobs aside, I also sit on the South Portland Neighborhood Association, and while I'm not representing them here today, through that role, I've heard a significant support for further extending the Greenway, something that extending the life of the North Macadam urban renewal area could help facilitate. I'll just end it there, but I'm happy to talk more about OHSU-specific jobs. I know, Andre, you mentioned an interest in jobs generally, so let me know if you have any more detailed questions about our employment.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Chris?
So related to the Central East Side, I think, I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't remember your name. Thank you. You suggested that the city should meet those development objectives with its own resources. I mean, I'm not aware that the city has a plenitude of capital resources, right? I mean, we're the big debate over a street maintenance fee just to keep the streets from falling apart. What resources would you suggest we use if not these?
Well, I'll give you a quick answer, and then I'll pass it on to Debbie, who has more experience with this than I do. I think that there are always sources of financing for transportation infrastructure. I suspect not only just from the city, but from the government in general. The other thing is that the city owns many of the properties that they would like to see developed in this area already. And I think that they can leverage their ownership to provide development by private parties. Also, I think that PDC has done an extremely good job in the Central East Side. They've actually developed what is a really vibrant, growing industrial area that people are moving into and growing. And I think that they need to step back now and let their momentum be carried forward by the private sector. Debbie, can you add?
I just want to, I think we need to ask ourselves if it's right to, because the city doesn't have enough money, that we instead take it from the county and schools. I think that's the big question for the league on this.
So you'd be okay if the city just dedicated its share of the property taxes for that area to these projects?
We have recommended that numerous times over the years, yes.
Yeah, and I think there's a time. I mean, this thing has been in existence for over 30 years. There has to be a time when the taxing jurisdictions recoup their investment and when the taxpayers' dollars go back to the purposes for which they were originally assessed.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you. Debbie Kitchen. And if anybody else wishes to testify on the URAs, please provide Julie a card. We are not taking testimony on the 2035 West Quadrant plan, so if you provided a card on that, it's not a hearing, it's just a work session for us, so we're not taking testimony on that. Go ahead, Debbie.
I'm Debbie Kitchen. I'm president of the Central East Side Industrial Council, and we have a letter that we sent to the city commissioners and the mayor, and I'm including that as my testimony today. We have had a member on the advisory committee for the amendments process. That was Peter Finley Fry was our representative, and CEIC is in support of the extension and expansion, but we had a number of priorities and concerns that represent what our members are concerned about. We want to ensure that there is efficient freight movement, and so we feel that that should be a priority of the expenditures in the Central East Side. We have a lot of industrial jobs in the district and businesses of all sizes, and we want to ensure that with the increased density of development, that we are able to continue to move products in and out of the district. And we want to increase the safety and access for all users, especially in the southern end of the district near the light rail stations. They're already kind of problematic getting to and from the Powell and Burns and the Ross Island Bridge, and so that's a concern. If you increase the density around the Clinton station, that would become a bottleneck area. We are concerned also about the Clinton Station. We didn't feel that there needed to be subsidies for development in this area because it's a prime opportunity. Unless, of course, and this isn't in my written comments, unless, of course, it is affordable housing. I had not heard affordable housing as one of the, until today, as one of the prospective uses there. We had been under the impression that it was market housing, and so we hadn't really addressed, our board has not addressed the affordable housing. I don't think it would be an issue, but there might be a subsidy needed if it was affordable housing. But if it's market housing and regular commercial development, we don't think that the funds should be spent there because it would be a prime area for redevelopment. We really want to focus on infrastructure improvements that will increase access for all the businesses in the district, and so that's a concern. The ODOT blocks have been identified as another priority project for PDC in this urban renewal area. The CEIC has supported redevelopment of the ODOT blocks for many years, and our goal is to have it redeveloped into and held in a private sector job expansion because we want it to go into the tax base. Some of the programs that have happened have redeveloped areas but haven't gone into the tax base, and we feel that's a concern for supporting our schools and supporting our community. We also think there may be a need for structured parking, but are supportive of evaluating that and looking at it and seeing if it is needed, and urge you to work with the CEIC Transportation and Parking Advisory Committee. And then we support Hand Neighborhood's call for safety improvements along 11th and 12th between Division and Hawthorne. Traffic does get going rapidly through there. We're not in favor of speed bumps because they can have an impact on freight, but some type of pedestrian crossing or lights are favorable in our opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marianne?
I'm Marianne Schwab. I'm speaking for myself, although I do wear many hats in the community. For the record, I did attend the Southeast Uplift Land Use and Transportation Committee when PDC came. Justin Douglas made the presentation. I don't remember them mentioning affordable housing in the Clinton Street Triangle. My concern with putting any affordable housing anywhere shouldn't be just because the land is there. You just heard one of the League of Women Voters mention a family situation. They're really not affordable when you're on a minimum wage. And it's pretty hard to talk to elected officials whose salaries are skyrocketed above anyone with this need. To build that kind of housing so close to a railroad is, to me, egregious. We've got oil trains coming, we've got coal trains coming, we've got Amtrak going through. We have 1,000 lifts a day from the railroad to trucks on our streets, and now we're faced to help them. We are going to be soon addressing street income tax. That also I would like to see tabled. I would like to see this tabled as well, because what's happening here with PDC is creating a split between the Hand Neighborhood Association and Brooklyn. Brooklyn is already sat between two major corporations. They've got TriMet and they've had PGE. Theirs was one of the first schools to be moved. Kids are on a bus being bussed over on Holgate. The whole neighborhood's been disrupted. And if they're giving away pieces of the pie, let's go back and see how we're distributing it. The article that came out last week from Brian Schmidt about who's really benefiting from this expansion, $310 million for another 30 years. Let's stop and let's do these figures, because I, for one, am in the gentrification mode. I can only live in my house as long as I can keep up with this. I can't. My property taxes are going to be increased, unlike what they've stated here. They will be affected for all of us. So let's stop the clock. And the other thing that I really find egregious is this happening in the month of December. 95 neighborhoods have not had input in this at this table because most of them do not meet in the month of December. And I've made that known in City Council on the 3rd when I heard the first PDC presentation. And Commissioner Amanda Fritz suggested that Brooklyn come here and plead here, because we realize that you are a stepgap, and then it goes on to City Council on December 17th. This is way too fast. And I appreciate your listening. I'm very upset that the mayor he just pops around like what he sees fit. And I think we really need to stop and work a little harder on this. I'm asking you to table this. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Debbie, I want to make sure I understand the CEIC position. So putting aside affordable housing, which I understand you haven't really had a chance to incorporate in your letter.
You're talking about Debbie or talking to Mary Ann?
Talking to Debbie.
Okay, excuse me.
So you support the extension and additional resources in the district, but you're really saying, let's not put any of it in Clinton Triangle because that can develop by itself. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
except for affordable housing, if that were.
Affordable housing aside, which is right, I understand.
And the transportation repair on to slow it down on 11th and 12th.
Okay, so Debbie, then my question is, I get that you want more resources, but do we really need to expand the district if you don't want to put any of the investment in the Clinton Triangle, or you just want to extend the timeline and generate more?
No, I think
more
some of the transportation and infrastructure changes that we would support would be right in that area, around that area. So it's I was referring to, commercial or
so you support
market housing.
Transportation investments in the Clinton Triangle.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you. We do not have any more testimony at this point for the urban renewal areas. If anybody has a last comment, please come up. Otherwise, we'll be closing the hearing for the public testimony. I'd like to ask PDC and the Housing Bureau to come back up and we'll talk.
This little, not the video cord on the back. So we can't move this.
So questions, or do you want to address some of the concerns that were raised first?
I'll start off on the big topic. I welcome the challenge on affordable housing, and these changes are not causing that challenge. The proposed changes add $7 million, have I got that right, that will go to PHB for affordable housing. So that's an additional $7 million. We could have continued with the status quo. PHB still would have been facing enormous challenges to achieve its goals, and this project has given a vehicle, to air an important community discussion. So I welcome that. I'm just not sure that doing nothing would be the right action to achieve the affordable housing outcome that we'd all like to see. I think it definitely will bring to the council's attention and is now a need to drill down on what the strategy is going to be to achieve the North Macadam affordable housing goals. But just to be clear, this change adds $7 million under the 30% set aside that goes to PHB.
And to add to that, that's the present value of the entire package. We anticipate between $30 to $40 million within the North Macadam urban renewal area that would be available as a result of this. And part of the range comes from one of the challenges that we have in this district, which is that we're basically at a point where we're almost cash flowing it. So any resources that we have available are those resources that are made through private investment. So one of the reasons that we have this important public-private partnership for with the Zidels is that we hope to help through our infrastructure investments, help them do private development, which will then generate the kinds of resources which we could invest in affordable housing. So the resources aren't available today, and we anticipate that if we succeed and if we reach the amount of private investment that we anticipate, that we will have additional resources towards the end of the life of the district.
I would also want to echo what has been discussed in terms of the leverage that we have as a city in those developments are happening, and to ensure that whatever agreements are drafted have enough teeth in order to make them successful. And so we agree with that component. And in addition to that, there's no way that we can build ourselves out of this issue. We have to be able to leverage the private sector. And so we have to, and at the Bureau, we continue to look at opportunities to do just that. But we do think that this proposed plan help us get at least to an increased number of units.
Okay. Questions? Oh, we'll start with you, Chris. And
somebody else can start. I don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead. Do it.
Well, actually, I was going to ask the question. It's not clear to me that delaying the process accomplishes anything. It seems like what needs to happen is that the agreements that are put in place are, in fact, producing what we asked them to do. So my question is, would the folks who are concerned about affordable housing, are they working with you to come up with recommendations on how to solidify and strengthen those agreements so we get the product?
So in terms of the agreement itself, I think that's more of a negotiation between PDC and the parties involved. We have provided language to the proposed language in order to ensure that affordable housing is kept whole in those developments, and that should we have opportunities or resources and ability to provide or have affordable housing in those developments, that we do that. In terms of our community and our housing partners, we have been in consistent communication, and they're aware as to where we are at with our processes, and with the understanding that we need to do more.
I think, my response to that, Mike, would be we're at the sound the alarm stage. That has occurred because the advisory committee on this project had a housing subcommittee, and the housing subcommittee said, how's this going to impact affordable housing? And PHB, which was enduring some criticism for what was happening in the River District, took that opportunity to say, well, as a matter of fact, we're struggling in North Macadam, and created a memo to that effect. The alarm was sounded. We're seeing a lot of terrific advocacy now, and I think we're just getting to, all right, what's the response? What are the next steps that we can take, including beefing up the language in the ZRZ development agreement, plans for PDC-owned property and making sure there are affordable housing components for that, securing other sites such as the Harbor NATO site that's owned by a combination of PBOT and ODOT. So I think we're just getting to that substantive, real-life response to this concern.
Chair Baugh took a quick break. Chris, did you have questions?
Sure. So I basically just want to add on to Mike's concern that I think we're not getting enough affordable housing production out of North Macadam, and I'm not satisfied that what's in front of us is going to produce enough. I'm not quite sure how to address that yet, but I'm concerned about it. But let me turn to Central East Side for a second, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I will add the disclaimer that in 2006 I supported the extension because it supported streetcar construction, and if somebody wants to call me a hypocrite, I'll take the hit. But what would happen if we didn't extend Central East Side? And I'd be interested to hear Don's perspective since he's on the Southeast Quadrant Plan. But what's really at risk if we just let the Clinton Triangle develop in the private market? What would we be missing?
Well, I think there are a couple things that need to happen to set the table in the Clinton Triangle. The first are some important pedestrian improvements and eliminating some traffic conflicts. So, for example, today you can't cross Powell on the east side of the intersection as a pedestrian. And then the second is this work with the Fire Bureau. And although there is land value there that could finance, and we would expect to finance their new facility, I think there's going to be a need for PDC assistance to actually make that transaction happen. So I'm not sure a whole lot of money in the end has to go into it, but I think PDC will play a critical role in actually affecting that move and making that land available for a transit supportive development.
Well, I guess that begs the question for the Central East Side expansion, could we dedicate a much larger percentage of the new revenue to affordable housing?
So the other, I think as we discussed at the joint PDC Board Planning and Sustainability Commission meeting, we've looked at the strategic sites and really have sort of a short list. In addition to the Clinton Station, we do have the ODOT blocks, which are 3 large parcels, which ODOT is now willing to sell to us. Those have been a priority for PDC for a long time, and so we're quite excited by the prospect. We anticipate that the acquisition and development of that will take a considerable amount of resources as well. So between the ODOT blocks and the Clinton Station, and then the OMSI development, where there's some infrastructure-related improvements as well, that takes the $12 million that this would allow us in additional resources pretty quickly. So I think that's the trade-off, right? There are always decisions, so it's not a no, you can't. It's just a which would you like to not invest in?
Yeah, Chris, I would agree with that. I think Jillian hit it just right, as did Debbie Kitchen. What we've discussed in our Southeast Quadrant plan in that area, the Clinton Triangle around the station, is primarily transportation-related fixes to improve freight access, freight circulation, to improve pedestrian circulation also. And I think the thought of our committee is that the sites are going to become much more valuable once the light rail station goes in, and the market will take care of those sites. We discussed some housing briefly as one of the alternatives to be considered, and it was never specified as affordable or market, but it was near that platform and just a portion of that land area, not a large piece of the land area. So I think the funding would really help on primarily the traffic improvements in that district. Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, and I would just like to reiterate, especially if it is transit-oriented development that you're looking to invest in. Oh, I'm sorry. Especially if it is transit-oriented development that you're looking to invest in, it seems like the market rate would be, the market would be able to take care of that, which would be another reason, especially in terms of housing development. That would be another reason to really consider, because it is a trade-off, but to really consider putting more resources into affordable housing. And I think we heard another point. We've heard the idea of instead shifting from, in the North Macadam area, instead of shifting from a numerical goal of housing units to a percentage, say like the Pearl District that said it wanted to strive for 30%. So would that affect the 30? I guess the question is, that would affect in turn the 30% set aside through URAs that goes to the Housing Bureau. Would that be a big concern in terms of allocating affordable housing units percentage-wise, like setting a percentage goal? Would that affect your 30% set aside?
I want to make sure I understand your question correctly. So right now, the way that the 30% set aside is calculated, it's based on it's 30% of resources.
Yes.
So you're wondering if that would change in the event that we made the target based on the total housing and then backed into a percentage of the housing developed?
Correct.
So I think that probably would have an impact. I can't say that we've done the analysis in this particular instance. I think we don't know yet how much residential or commercial will be developed, and so it's still, I don't. We could make a guess as to whether 30% would be more or less, but there have been a number of different discussions about the kinds of uses. One of the first, ZRZ is doing a residential development, but then they would be doing some commercial development as well. So I don't know that I'm.
Okay. And say in the event that we were aware of that number, we had the planned units right in front of us. What would be the process for reevaluating that revenue stream? Like if we needed to bump up a revenue set aside for the Housing Bureau, what's the process that you went through to establish that 30%?
Okay, so the 30% set aside is a city policy.
Okay.
City approved policy that was adopted in 2007, I think, and reiterated in 2012 or maybe 2006 and 2011. So this is a city adopted policy. Okay. And on an annual basis, City Council reviews our budget, and so allocations are made at that time period. So as was mentioned, the 30% sets the floor, but City Council can determine if they would like to see more housing in one area, less in another, or if they'd like us to exceed the 30%.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Teresa? No? Gary? No?
Actually, have one for Joe.
One more.
It's a little bit tangential, but the policy of redevelopment areas mirroring the city income profile is something that don't currently have in the draft comp plan for the new revision, right?
Correct. We actually changed it in the Portland plan as well. So this discussion we've been having for a while, and we did that in collaboration with the Housing Bureau when we sort of started to recalibrate our housing expectations in the Portland plan, and we've carried it through into the draft comp plan, and you're going to see a version of it reflected when we talk about the West Quadrant. And so our objectives now go more to maintaining or striving for a diversity of units within every neighborhood. But what we found was we set just a sort of a essentially unrealistic goal for ourselves to match the income profile of the whole city in every neighborhood. That's just wasn't producing anything.
Varying land values.
Well, just for all those reasons. And then with the new Portland Housing Bureau strategy, we went through the exercise of looking at this concept of opportunity areas and how you choose where these limited housing resources are spent. And the opportunity area approach suggests that some neighborhoods already have a lot of stuff that helps households who live there succeed or save money, transit, and that. Although it can cost more to produce units in those neighborhoods, it may be a higher priority to get more units in those neighborhoods versus a neighborhood where some of those inherent support services, schools and the like, aren't so provided. So we have moved away from mirroring the profile. We're looking more at this idea of opportunity. We're keeping our eye on the importance of the diversity of housing types and incomes in all of our neighborhoods, and it applies to affordability for low-income households, but also it's our aging community as well. So it's a more robust way to look at housing. And actually, when we look at West Quadrant, we're going to talk about it there as well.
So that was a great transition to kind of talk about housing, which I'd like to talk about, and how we can get to kind of a solution here. First, the Zidell's agreement, my understanding is that's not going to produce any housing because it's very expensive for the Housing Bureau to buy into. So as much as we want to say that's a great agreement, we're probably not going to get much housing out of it because of the expense of buying into that agreement. Is that a fair characterization?
Not a specific lots associated with that. The PHB would get a lot assigned for affordable housing, most definitely. It's an expensive proposition. However, in terms of their own developments and having affordable units in those developments, that's something that we would definitely want to.
But that would be a requirement that we would have to have them produce on their own.
Correct.
Okay. And is that in the agreement today?
That is what we're proposing in the agreement.
That's what you're proposing, but it's not there today.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So the other part is as we look at both these districts, what I hear is housing is very important. It's the next, once you get the district going, it's the first priority of expenditures to build if you have extra money. Is that fair?
Well, I think, you have to have infrastructure. So
Yeah,
housing
but
needs
after-
a street, and so you're saying, after that, and then, but you do need the private investment that generates the TIF that pays for that street. And because affordable housing usually has a property tax exemption because it's nonprofit owned, there is that tension that if that's the next thing out, you're not generating the money to pay off, the bond that built the street. So that's the vice that we're in, and is why the affordable housing dollars in North Mac are shown as coming later.
So maybe I didn't characterize it correctly. So if you've built all the infrastructure, or you've funded all the infrastructure, and you have enough money in the TIF district to fund all the infrastructure, the priority for the dollar that comes after that is funded, maybe not built because you haven't built it fast enough, but the private development is coming. That first dollar after that, is it for housing or is it up for grabs for 70-30 housing infrastructure again?
So it's guaranteed at least 30, right? So
It's
that's
guaranteed
the
first 30, yeah.
at least guaranteed. That's right. But in addition to that, I think we have within the North Macadam urban renewal area anticipated that there could be future. Once we've satisfied the requirements of the two development agreements with PSU and ZRZ, if we're successful, there will be additional resources. Certainly housing, that would be a time when we could exceed the 30%. There's also been interest in further extending the greenway, so I think that there might be a couple of items on that that would.
I don't want to pit housing against greenway, but and that's not the issue here. But if the city, I'm trying to determine, is housing the priority for these two districts? Kind of yes or no?
Okay, the number one, I'm going to say, the number one priority, I just want to be clear, especially in North Mac, is that we need to complete the street system. And then after that, we need to complete the community. And
so complete the.
I mean, we got to have the greenway and we got to have affordable housing. And, we're probably going to be working on both fronts at all times, not, sort of putting one off indefinitely, to get to the other.
Let's not go back there.
I don't want to pit that. This is not pitting. So here's what I'm proposing. I believe in goals, and I really do believe that it shouldn't be 30% of research. It's 30% of the development. If you're going to have these communities develop in the URA, you're going to bring jobs, and they're industrial jobs, they're the industrial office or whatever on the Central East Side or on North Macadam. To have jobs without affordable housing, and especially in some of the areas around low-wage affordable housing in a transit-rich district, doesn't make sense. It is certainly a opportunity to say, how do you get to the 30% of total production? But at first, you got to have a goal. And I think, yes, 30% of the total units causes council to look at that and say, how do we get there? Because 30% of resources means that the budget continues at 30% at a floor. And 30% of production causes you to rethink how you're getting to a number. And so I think we need the rethinking of how we're going to get the production, because 200 units out of 4,000 is not very good. And we need to get better at developing the affordable housing. And we're going to talk about kind of what that policy looks like in Central East Side here in a few minutes, but I think that gets to there. The other side I would suggest is to this system of how PDC does its budgeting, and what Kimberly talked about is every year council comes and looks at the budget, is my understanding, and says, either we're meeting the budgetary requirements, or if we have additional, then they look at how that budget is allocated. I propose that we recommend, once they've reached their funding for what they have in the budget, what we passed today, they relook and prioritize housing as the highest priority, along that they fund that at a higher rate than they have at 30%. Because you're not going to get a number of housing units unless you increase the funding and develop other tools to get to, because otherwise it's going to continue to be 30% of housing for the next a long time. And you got to change the funding mechanism. You've got to change the look of what council does. Council right now makes we're going to do 70-30, and we kind of keep down that path. This, to me, causes council, I can't promise council will come back and say it's different, but at least council has to look and say they're not meeting 30% of the units. And why are we not meeting 30%? If it's council's choice for the next 20 years to not meet it, then that's their choice. But at least they've made a conscious choice not to meet 30% of the units. And that gets to, how do you have a diverse community in these neighborhoods? Because otherwise we're going to have not very diverse communities.
So, Andre, so the floor is at 30.
But it's 30% of resources.
30% of resources is the floor.
Yeah.
Your point is, if the resources go up, don't feel like you've already achieved your ultimate goal by hitting the floor of 30%.
Yes.
Right? Now, if the resources, the amount of resource goes up, is that amount of resource still constrained to North Macadam District? Is it localized in that district?
Well,
And
yes.
if so,
It can't be
increase the
spent.
number of housing units, and that's
Well,
what you're advocating.
yeah.
You can't go outside the district.
You can't go outside the district. So in the Central East Side, the same thing. If you have a goal of 30% production, if the resources go up to housing, and as Javier said, they produce other tools, they can produce more units if in the future the districts are successful and they have more resources.
So we keep those additional units in the district?
In the district, and they're part of that production unit. And theoretically, it allows that conversation for the Greenway to occur too, because you've kind of freed up that 70-30 thing to say, well, housing is important. What else is important that we could fund outside of that traditional 70-30? Because I want to break the 70-30 model.
You want to break it as an end point.
As an end point. This is an interesting discussion, because the PDC model is you get a bigger bucket for the same process. The infrastructure just gets a bigger bucket of 70%. And I'm saying, no, the bucket's full. Talk about the other bucket and how big is that bucket in the future. And is it 70% and is infrastructure 30%? And it doesn't guarantee that that happens, but it guarantees council has that discussion. Gary.
Andre, I really like the idea of having some concrete goals to work with, but I also, for me, there's some larger questions here, like, how much housing should we be doing at all in this district? And I think that's really a question of housing area versus jobs area. Is the area going to be transportation rich enough over time to allow mass transit as a primary way for folks to get to jobs? Do we need to have the housing right adjacent to the jobs? I'm not sure that's a standard we've embraced elsewhere. I think one of the testifiers brought up some questions about health. This is a heavy industrial traffic, freight traffic, rail traffic area. Is that a great place to be building housing at any income level? And finally, I think there's a little mathematical quirk. If you use a percentage criterion, what if you're not making it, you can just decrease the total number of housing units developed ultimately, so that you get a very small housing complement. And you've made your 30%, but it's trivial. It's 3 units out of 10,
Yes.
For example. And so I'm not sure what the solution is, but to me, it just feels like there's some higher order questions that also need to be addressed.
I think part of those questions are addressed. Go ahead.
Just in support of what Gary said, I think we do need an overall picture of how we're going to meet our housing targets. And maybe this is not the vehicle for it. I don't know. Maybe it is. Got to take a stand sometime. But that it is, as you kind of indicated, a trivial part of it. And we do have a pretty large problem that we need to look at citywide.
And to that point, we are kind of backwards here because in the next central city, there's citywide goals for housing and for the central city that are being proposed that get to more specifics that don't
The
answer
West Quadrant discussion.
the West Quadrant discussion that don't address all of your answers, but give us enough direction to say how we will answer a lot of those questions. And part of the question that Joe raised and really is, in a transit-rich district, you can put people in housing, lower wage people and with no income, that actually give them a better income because they don't have to pay between 5 and 15% of their income into transit. And so by putting them in the downtown core, which is considered one of the most transit-rich districts in the country, if not we're able to reduce part of their total housing, including transportation, and have them close to their jobs. There are issues of health and there are other issues, but this is certainly an opportunity. Yeah. Joe?
Yeah, just we're going to have this central city housing discussion as part of the next item, but a couple of points to clarify. Today, affordable housing is like 35% of the housing in the central city, but that's today, and that's not the rate at which it's being produced as market rates are coming on. So 30% in South Waterfront would be a big lift. I mean, even the goals in the current plan are in the 600 unit range, 700 unit range. So it's doubling, over doubling that, but still it sets there as, so the 30% objective and trying not to lose ground in the central city is an understandable goal. It suffers from the same problem that we've been talking about all day. The plan and the financial strategy to get there over 25 years has not been developed, but it sits there as a potential way to calibrate how much housing you're shooting for and express the relative priority of housing. But the other big point I think that Commissioner Baugh is making is the 30% is a floor, not a ceiling, and that as the resources of the district become more clear, it sounds like the recommendation is that we need to take we need to try to prioritize more of those additional funds for housing, regardless of the goal, because we're going to need just even the TIF funds themselves, as we've talked about, don't produce the housing. It takes a combination of a lot of resources, local and state.
So, and I would add to that that we ought to ask the TIF districts to follow the Central City Plan housing goals that are all-encompassing of the Central City that we'll talk about next. So if we agree to those, we ought to, they're part of the Central City, we ought to have them do that. Other comments or questions?
We need an action or
Andre?
Yeah.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're proposing. It's essentially that we approve this with a set of recommendations to City Council attached, right?
Yes.
And I'll ask you to restate those in something like the language you'd like us to add in a minute. But just want to float the alternative, which is that we could basically choose not to adopt these today and ask PDC and Housing Bureau to come back with a stronger plan for housing before we look at this again. And I don't know if there's any appetite on the commission for that as opposed to just making a recommendation.
Discussion?
I could talk about my appetite. You know, the way I acknowledge those as both viable options, Chris. You know, I'm tempted to kind of go with what's proposed because with these amendments are part of the solution. And I think as we move forward, we want to articulate. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Is this
and
on?
into the mic, please. Yes, 'cause there are many of us have.
Do you actually want to hear what I'm saying? God love you. I was just talking about my appetite. I think these are both viable options. What I said was that the amendment to these urban renewal plans are part of the solution. It's going in the right direction, even for those who are concerned about the amount of affordable housing. These are part of the solution. They're not detracting from that. And I think we could articulate a good recommendation to council that might consider the ideas that you're talking about, Andre. So I kind of lean towards adding positive support and constructive additions to be considered by council going forward. I lean that way. Okay.
Teresa?
Is there a timing issue relative to fiscal cycles or whatever that dictates that it would be much better if it was done sooner?
No, we at this point will be able to, in the event that City Council gives the direction, we will be able to make the positive impact to the taxing jurisdictions through an administrative, basically through administrative forms. We have a super notice out, so there will be a lot of people coming to City Council on the 17th. So in the event that this body did not want to act and we didn't want to go to City Council on the 17th, then that would be really the only impact at this point.
Well, I think, I mean, from the perspective of the mayor's office, given the notice, we will have a hearing on the 17th so that people who want to speak to the overall package of amendments have the opportunity to do so. We'd love to have a recommendation from the Planning Commission to share with the council. And if we don't have that, or we have something, some other kind of comment, you know, we'll share that too.
Other comments? So to move forward, Chris has asked about delaying. How many people are kind of saying that would be something they'd be interested in? Or
I'm sorry, I
in terms of delaying the URA's vote today? And the option is that we pass what we have today, but I think I would want to add the 30% of production. Specifically, I would want to add the change in how they look at the review and add housing as a high priority. And I would add that the URAs follow the Central City policies and goals for housing. Yes.
But I think Chris's delay was delay with additional information.
Yeah, I mean, specifically it would be to request that the two bureaus come back with, you know, a stronger plan. Now, I think it's an open question how much stronger a plan we would get, but it would be a way of signaling that we're more serious about this than just adding a recommendation.
Yeah.
So if I could chime in, the findings as we review them against the comprehensive plan, the amendments are in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Tactically, this is, you know, sort of what we're talking about, using this moment of leverage to push, and that makes perfect sense. And, you know, we're an advocacy commission as well, so that makes sense to me. I'm not sure, but technically, we have a solid case about being in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The sooner this action takes place, the sooner resources flow back to the taxing jurisdiction, so the sooner those benefits take place as well. We can ask Javier and Kimberly. I'm not really sure the time frame it would take to really, in a meaningful way, respond, Chris. You know, like to have a response that was sound enough and meaningful enough corresponded to the seriousness of the question. So I'm not sure that this tactical moment of leverage is necessarily well advised, but
the question I have is, and again, I just think it's what would you be looking for from PDC specifically that would be included in the Housing Bureau? I mean, I guess, I have the luxury of seeing the Central City plan, so I have worked with the Housing Bureau to kind of get them to.
Yeah, well, I mean, the specific objective would be to have a different allocation of the resources that would lend to more affordable housing production. I guess I am.
So you're actually.
I have no certainty how much further they could advance that than what they've already done, but it would signal that we're serious about this. I'm sure there'd be an article in the Oregonian, and we'd get some more attention around this issue, and a bunch of tactical advocacy things would happen. I don't hear anybody else jumping on the bandwagon here. So,
well, Chris, I think that's part of the foundation for our recommendation to council. Is that we're so I'm chiming in support of kind of advocating your position, but I do want to vote this through.
Right.
I in the strongest way want to point to council and say housing is your number one priority.
Yeah.
You need to do something. You need to look at this every year, and if you don't, it's a failing on your doorstep, not ours. I mean, it really is a city failing. So I agree with you. I was all in the hold it up. Let's point this. I think we can point it with our recommendation in the strongest way. I've committed to going to PDC and making this point as part of that at the PDC hearing, which is going to be unprecedented for us to show up and say,
well, I think it'll be well received.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's well received, and to go to council and say, these are our priorities, and by the way, they're all in alignment with starting back to the Portland plan and going forward through our comp plan.
Okay. Well, I have not made a motion, and I will be very interested to hear yours.
Yes, Gary.
Andre, this is a minimalist suggestion, but I'm wondering if we just delay this vote until the end of the meeting and have the discussion on housing within the context of the 2035 West Quadrant Plan. We may come up with some better articulation of what we want to see in the course of that discussion, and would allow a vote today.
Okay. I like that. The question is time, because we still we have the Green Infrastructure Panel, and I want to be responsive to that.
So within a recommendation, if we were to approve this and follow up with a recommendation, would it, sorry. So if we were to approve this today and follow up with a set of recommendations for strengthening the plan, is it even possible to say for the North Macadam that instead of maintaining the number of units that affordable housing units we create, that we actually exceed that and go back, or that changes the entire percentage of revenue allocation if we were to add on additional units to that affordable housing goal? And
well, that's what I'm suggesting. If we say 30% of the total production, we change the number of units that they need to change, and versus 30% of resources.
Okay, but then, okay.
It's over the life of the district. We have a forecast today of what it's going to produce. That's what, the fiscal analysis by PDC has been based on. And as Jillian explained, there's this period where there's some front-end investment. And, and the Pearl was its own version of the same thing. This is the front-end investment. The private investment comes in. You're starting to pay off those bonds. If private investment goes at a more accelerated pace, like the experience in the Pearl, the district can throw off more resources down the road. And what Commissioner Baugh is saying is that if it performs that way, we know the only way to hit the affordable housing goal is if the 70-30 is rethought.
Okay.
And so it's for that point down the road, and it is absolutely possible to do that. That's what Kimberly was saying. Every year, I guess, City Council looks at the budget for PDC and this district. So they're in a position to see it. Now, following through on that's their prerogative, but that's the message you all would be sending with this recommendation.
And we've been here before. We were in the situation and decided that we would accomplish more by setting a very forceful set of recommendations to City Council. I was tending toward Chris's suggestion to delay and come back, but does that buy us as much leverage as being very explicit about what we want to see come out of these plans? That's the question for me. And has what Andres suggested so far really, does it achieve that objective?
Teresa?
Well, I would be in favor of moving it forward with a proposal. However, I think we do need to have an understanding on our commission of when we're going to take a stand, because we really can't just turn a blind eye for the next whatever number of decisions come up that have some housing slice in them. Now, I haven't been on the commission for very long, so, I'm fresh and I'm ready to do whatever. But I think we do need to have that discussion about, as a commission, where we're going and how we're going to actually really help make that impact.
Well, I would say this. We will have a huge opportunity on bonuses, because what is the bonus parameters for when we talk next, and describing height, if you're going to do height and some of the other things, and when you talk bonuses for the city, if housing is important, then bonus maybe ought to be the first priority for achieving those things. So I agree with you. We do need to take a stand. I think this is, from my perspective, kind of the first push out the door in pushing back on housing and saying you need to do better about housing, and it starts in the central city. And so Chris, where do you?
All right, well, let's just go through the process. So I'll go ahead and make the motion. My motion is that we ask PDC and the Housing Bureau to return with a plan that strengthens the production of affordable housing units in both of these districts.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that you're talking about a delay.
Yes.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded that we delay the vote and ask them to return. It would be in 2015, early sometime, Julie, is that correct? Yeah, sometime in early 15.
Well, they have to do the work.
Yeah, so I don't know.
And there are other committees that think this is their purview. So, PHB and PDC have advisory boards.
Okay.
Question: if we do that, will the proposal then be pulled from the PDC and City Council agendas?
Well,
No.
it's not going to be pulled from City Council, and they're the final authority.
So are we losing advisory leverage by doing that?
Joe, statutorily, can City Council proceed without our finding that it complies with the comprehensive plan?
I believe that City Council, I need to go actually back and review the ordinance.
Joe, we actually have our
thank
consultant, so you can.
I'm Elaine Howard. I'm the urban renewal consultant working with PDC on this plan. So the statute is written very interestingly. It says that a substantial amendment has to go to the Planning Commission for their review. It doesn't explicitly say what the Planning Commission does. Another part of the statute says that the plan has to conform to the comprehensive plan. Okay? So, in my experience with other communities, only once have we had a situation where the Planning Commission didn't say it conformed. And at that point, we did get legal counsel opinion that it could go to City Council, and City Council could make that finding on their own, because the statute doesn't say explicitly it has to be made by the Planning Commission, and that if the City Council felt like that was true, they could make that finding. Whether or not your City Council would want to do that, I don't know, but statutorily and legally, they could.
Can we not delay and also send a memo with the points that we're trying to make?
Delay and send a memo. Sure. We can do anything we want. So we've got a motion on the table. So we need to vote on it. And so, Julie, you want to call a vote?
Hanson? Nay.
Aye.
Yes.
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 To confirm, this is to delay?
To delay.
Well, it's a little more than delay. It's asking for
Additional feedback?
Yeah.
Additional work.
Yes.
No. So it's 4-2, right? So we've moved to delay. So before we move off this, I think we're missing an opportunity to go to council and say whatever. But that's what you guys want to do. I think we need to be very specific about what we want PDC to come back with, because we're asking them to do some work, and the Housing Bureau to be very, very specific about what is it we want them to achieve when we see it again.
Well, I don't think we've abrogated our opportunity to go to city council. We can do two things. One is do what you just suggested. The second is we can communicate with city council what our concerns were and what we want to see addressed.
We'd be doing in person what we'd be doing with a letter.
Right.
Well, I guess that's the issue.
And city council can make a finding that they find it in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
And so they can make a I guess we missed the opportunity to say that.
Oh.
Well, see, I think we get a bigger opportunity because this will now be in the press that we didn't approve it. So
okay.
our message is gonna be
So are
louder,
we
I think.
asking? So we will have a letter of nonconformance, and we're still asking PDC.
Well,
to
no,
come
we
back.
haven't had a finding that we're not.
Well, we're not
So,
non-conformance.
happy to put your two recommendations in a letter to send it to city council.
We have significant concerns that need to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay.
So based on what we just heard from the PDC consultant, the matter has been presented to the Planning and Sustainability Commission at a public hearing. So the letter would document that took place.
Yeah.
It would document your concerns. It would document that you did not vote to make a finding of conformance with the comprehensive plan pending this additional information.
Okay.
Like that's how I would hear hear what you all just did.
But we have to articulate why we think this isn't in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and the staff has already articulated that it is in
No, we're not saying that it's not in conformance. We're asking for additional information.
It's the absence of a yes, not a no.
Right.
that
It's sort of,
correct, Joe?
this is a non-action, the way
It's
I
a
hear it,
non-action.
Don. And
Okay.
So we're
as
not-
such,
Tell us more.
Sit in, Don.
as such, the city council could receive that position and
they can go. They can
and feel that
they can-
additional
they can move
information
ahead
is
and
not
approve it,
necessary.
or they can consider our comments and ask for further action.
So,
right?
okay.
this is a non-action.
So this is a non-action. We are not saying it's not in conformance. What we're saying is we have significant concerns, and we're asking PDC and the Housing Bureau to address those concerns. And we need to articulate those concerns specifically. And we will put that in a letter and send that to, I will take that message to the housing, or not to housing, but to PDC and to council.
I think you have it captured. One thing I would say is that because the North Macadam district is so close to South Waterfront, and that is just the huge example of failure, I think it does carry a little bit more weight in conjunction with this district.
Okay. So
Could you say that again? Did you say that North Cadam is a huge failure?
No, I said the South Waterfront in terms of the number of affordable housings that have been created.
Okay.
So it just, the proximity, you can point right at it.
It's the same
it's the same
area.
district. So different.
sorry. Yeah. Okay.
So we need to get PDC and Housing Bureaus very specific what you're looking for So I'm not clear, but Chris, I'm going to leave it up to you to get to Julie very quickly some clear expectations. I think I know what you're looking for, and I will certainly try to help in that vein. And anybody else that has concerns that they would like to have PDC address?
So I'm happy putting it, again, reiterating, happy approving it as it's in conformance. I'm just not happy with the allocation of housing goals.
Okay.
That's what Chris is saying.
That's what Chris is saying.
Okay. So putting that forward, but future, what would happen if it was 3-3 if we voted? If it was complete tie, it would just further debate.
Reconsidering votes.
Yeah.
Two people.
Tie vote
Two
fails.
people abstain.
Tie vote fails.
Okay.
So
Well, actually, the chair can break a tie
Chair
vote.
can break a tie.
Okay.
So, but
Well, but he's voting anyway.
So
He was part of the tie.
concerns. We need to roll this up. Concerns. If I can ask everybody to get their concerns to Julie by Friday, in writing what your concerns are. Well, it's got to be before Friday because it's the 11th that it's at PDC, correct?
Correct. We're going to the board. Thursday.
I need it by tomorrow to Julie what your concerns are because we need to get a letter put together and get to and what our request is of PDC and the Housing Bureau to come back to us with. And I think we've articulated what our concerns are. It's just what is the request we're asking them to come back to us with.
Yeah, I think it'll be up to the council if they decide to proceed with the amendments. I mean, I hear clearly from the community and from the Planning Commission a desire for a strong, clear implementation plan for how we achieve the North Macadam goals. The goals are not being changed by the action we're bringing forward to the council, but certainly we're hearing we need to lay out the steps for how those goals are achieved.
Well, I think the goals are being changed, though. I think what we're recommending is that you increase the amount of housing, affordable housing in the district. Because if you say 30%.
Well, you didn't take an action on that.
Well, but that's going to be, I think, part of the letter that
And
rolls
happy to
out
make that
there.
a motion if we want.
Huh?
If you want to vote of the full commission to support those two recommendations, I'm happy to make a motion on that.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And then we can.
Wait, before you do that. These are going to be tough goals to reach.
Yeah.
I don't know if you price land down in that district, but affordable housing is very difficult to achieve. Just be aware of that geography.
And it will, I mean, we should then come back to in the context of what, how far will the resources go and what other public objectives won't be accomplished. I mean, parks wants a 3-acre park, completing the greenway is a must, the quality of public streets that are expected here. I mean, it's, we're not proposing to amend the plan. If you want to amend the plan, I really would recommend to you that then you look at all the aspects of the plan. If you just want to find out how we're going to implement the plan that we have, I think it doesn't,
Well, I think our motion asks you to come back to us with a different plan that has more affordable housing production.
Well, I think it's in the out years of saying after you've looked at what you have today in terms of the 70%, and you've take your plan today and you fulfilled that 70%, what's budgeted today, to relook at those additional resources if they come available and say, how do you allocate them? Do you continue to put 70% in the out years into infrastructure, or do you and the 70-30, or do you say the mix is different? Is it 60-40 housing now and 40% infrastructure? And that's, from my perspective, that's what I'm looking for. I'm not saying you not do the infrastructure you have planned today. It's because that, to me, is the foundation to ensure that by all good planning, you get to the goal of just the development of the URA. That's the base. Now, if you exceed the base, what do you do with the additional funds?
And there's certainly precedent for that. If you look at the South Park blocks, for example, I think currently we're at 56%. So our closeout strategy will get us closer to 60, I think, 50, somewhere between 50 and 60. So that's not without precedent. I think that is, and within the interstate urban renewal area, having put in significant infrastructure investments and done some catalytic projects with the mayor's office, there was an additional $20 million. So I think that's well within practice and within the purview. I think the question is just the sequencing of it. And as I mentioned and what Jillian said, the TIF doesn't become available unless the infrastructure and other investments are made first. And so that's just the nature of the tool that we have.
And I'm just saying that precedent to kind of document that precedent as a policy that is.
Okay.
What's this? You know, sorry, Don.
Is it of concern to PDC that if we do affordable housing and it's developed by nonprofits, it's off the tax rolls? How do you get paid back for your infrastructure investment?
Well, I think that's really the crux of the issue. Once you have enough taxable investment in order to service the bonds, then you can make additional. You can look at your resources and allocate additional resources towards non-taxable investments.
So let me follow up with a motion that we send a letter to City Council reflecting the policy suggested by the chair that the goal for affordable housing production in North Macadam be 30% of all housing.
Well, not North Macadam, but also Central East Side. We're looking at
North Macadam and Central East Side be 30% of all housing produced, and that once the district has produced funds sufficient for its core infrastructure bond service, that the City Council should assess directing additional revenue to affordable housing. Capture that as you intended, Andre?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
And one comment, I'll go back to Jillian's comment. You know, we want people to be living in a community that is livable. So there are other objectives out there, and as long as basic infrastructure needs include the greenway, include parks, include all of the other essentials of that community, then I'm fine with that.
Parks or infrastructure?
We're not
Parks is infrastructure.
talking about either or, right?
No,
It's in the master plan.
It's in the master plan, yeah.
Right.
Joe?
Well, just one more time, I feel the need to just say that the motion is just there's a motion on the table, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we should probably vote on that before.
Do you want to talk about the motion or?
Well, the 30% is a noble goal.
Mm-hmm.
We have not tested the financial feasibility or rationale or the ability to hit 30% over the next 25 years as in the central city as a whole. So I do not want to represent that there is a strategy behind that goal.
Yep.
And we're holding up this amendment to an urban renewal area around really a sound objection, which is that the more money needs to be spent on affordable housing. But it's going to seem unrealistic, or the message may get the message may get misunderstood because it's also accompanying an aspirational but patently probably unrealistic goal, especially in North Macadam, to get to 30% of 4,000 units.
The alternative is to put our stamp of approval on something that doesn't meet our values.
No, I'm just putting it out there that
Values
that's the circumstance.
a lot of different geographies of our city.
Julie?
Nay.
Aye.
Aye. Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes. Any final comments on urban renewal? Do you have enough direction?
Actually, I mean, your final discussion and that additional motion do add some clarity to what you're looking at.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so we will have a letter for PDC on Friday, council week after, and I will be at both to deliver the message.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is 2035 West Quadrant Plan, work session. And we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're running behind, so.
That was a good warm-up.